Hey guys, this is Brad from Blue Nile Farm. Welcome to episode number 8. And today we're going to talk about land itself. And this is land that has been logged, you might find on the market where Amish have come in or a logging company and they pretty much knocked down a lot of the trees, left the stumps, left a lot of the tops of logs, and these properties go up on sale and people purchase them for various reasons. So normally there are numerous acres, anywhere from 1 or 2 acres to hundreds of acres. So it all depends on what you can find and what you are able to purchase. You know, as far as the property costs go, I would say they're still pretty competitive. They may be a few $1,000s down um, over what you would get on a different type of property, but they're pretty expensive. And I think you need to understand what kind of undertaking you're going to have when you buy property like this. One, they lumbered anything of value, so the trees of value have been taken off. They made their money off the property they're selling. They're making more money based on the sale of the property. Secondly, if you are a buyer of this property, not only are you still worried about the same thing, it's about planning, what you plan on doing with the property, as far as water, what's going to work and what's not going to work. You still deal with different regulations within your township that you live in. So this is all going back to your research that you did before. But now you have a new commitment that you have to be aware of, and it's going to be about cleaning up that property. Some guys buy this land and they let it grow, and it gets really thick, and small trees will grow really quickly. And within 7 to 10 years, it'll be so hard for you to even walk through it because it's nothing but a big mess. So, I would think that if you purchase property like this, you should be in there as quick as possible and cleaning it up. But you need to be understanding that it's going to cost you a lot of money to clear this property. Number one, if you don't have the equipment, and what I mean by equipment is a pretty good sized excavator. And maybe a dozer. And those would be the tools that you'll need the most. One, to actually the excavator to pull the stumps out and the debris, move them out of the way, and the dozer to push them into a pile and decide how you want to manage it. Now, for me, I look at that kind of property as still a source of making money, but you're not going to make the money on the logs. You can still make firewood out of whatever's left. And if you have a chipper or mulcher and you can chop up those logs themselves or the tops of trees and turn them into chips, I think that that's at least a viable option if you have that luxury, or you pay somebody to come in there and work with you to do that. But you're still stuck with the stumps. And stumps, as far as I'm concerned, that's a lot of time to sit there and tear up a lot of stumps off a property, and just some of them could be pretty big. So what do you do with these stumps? Well, personally, I look at stumps as an economic opportunity. I don't look at it as a waste. And the reason I tell you that is because I cleared 14 acres of my own property, and I wound up having the stumps popped off, and I wound up pushing them with the dozer back into a huge pile, and they sat in that pile. And they sat in that pile for anywhere from 7 to 10 years. And then about 10 years later, I went back and I picked through that pile with an excavator, and I wound up having nothing but a huge amount of topsoil. That topsoil is either could be A, applied back to that field, or B, you can sell it. And at $25 a yard, there's a lot of money there. So I figured I have at least $5,000 to $10,000 at least of topsoil sitting there, just waiting for me to start digging through it. And that's being on the light side. I couldn't even honestly tell you how many yards are actually there. All I know is I have a pretty nice pile, and it still sits there. And I have a soil screener, and I am going to eventually start screening it and probably selling it because of the material that's actually put in there. And I know it's really good soil. So that's step one. If you sit there and you take those stumps and you bury it, I think you have nothing but trouble. And you try to burn it, you can try to burn it, but again, I would still, once those stumps come out of the ground and they're able to hit air, and then they go through the weathering process, they will break down and it will turn into topsoil. And even if after so many years you want to go in there and mix that pile around, that's fine. But you still, again, have to have the right equipment to go play around with that stuff. But I personally think if you bury stumps, that's a bad option. And you have to get the stumps out of the ground because it's not going to do you any good. So let me look at it from this perspective. Even if I'm not farming my ground and say I wanted to clear the stumps off the ground, even if I wanted to just turn it into a pasture for my animals, it is in your best interest to get rid of stumps once you own property. And I'm not talking about going there and grinding the stumps. I'm talking about pulling them damn stumps completely out of there, and it'll do you some good. If there's property that people sell and they go out and they lumber their woods and they cut the tree down at the base and they leave that stump there, Well, sadly, those stumps will be sitting there for years and years and years, and they will never rot. So you can't go through the plow or a piece of farm equipment trying to get them out, because all they're going to do is jam you in the ground, and it's just causing you nothing but problems. So if you want to actually work the ground and to till the ground and to farm the ground, you need to remove the stumps. That's my best thing. Even if you have brush, that's the same problem people do is, when these forests grow up and you let them grow, you have small trees. And if those trees go 5 to 7 years old, they're going to have a pretty good root ball in there. And you can't pull that root ball up at all. You have to actually pull it out. So you can actually clear land like that with a skid steer and say a Danuser Intimidator and go through and start pulling all that debris out. And then you can actually work that ground. But you got to pull stumps, and you got to get all those roots out of that ground the best you can. And, even when I cleared my property, we had excavators out there, and a guy in with a big D6 high track, was paying them per hour, and it was just becoming quite expensive. And what they would do would be knocking these trees down and let them sit there, but at least they had the stumps popped out. Then I would actually cut the logs off, cut the tops off, pull the logs out of the way, and I tried to burn the tops. But that's before I really understood about land clearing. And I also started getting into the firewood scene too, because there's money to be made in firewood. But the point, or even if you have the firewood, you can at least use it yourself. But the problem is you have to have the right tools. You're not going to run down a Tractor Supply and buy yourself a $200 chainsaw and go out there and think you're going to process a bunch of firewood. Get yourself a $700, $1,000, $1,500 chainsaw. Then you're able to really cut some serious wood. Keep that thing sharp. And as far as processing wood go, there's a lot of higher end log splitters. You can get a log splitter on your skid steer. You can with a 6-way blade or a 4-way blade, and you can manage big, huge logs and start splitting them that way if you have a skid steer. Or, there are different log splitters that are not the old hydraulic ones that take forever, come in and split and go back out. You're wasting 30 seconds, almost a minute for those things to go forward and back. You can get some of these Kinetic splitters, and, they can split wood, within 2 seconds. So you have to get the right tools to make your life a lot easier. And you got to go out on the market and see what happens. So you have to have the right equipment to get the job done. And that's kind of what I'm emphasizing. And even though you have property like this, you have to, it's a huge commitment, and you can't let it sit over time. So, and if you start paying somebody to come in with an excavator, you could be getting charged $200 or more per hour, and that's going to be really, really pricey. And, don't be surprised if you spend over $10,000 an acre to actually get some of that area cleared. So it's not cheap. And you can go out and buy this equipment, and you can spend a lot of money on that too. And if you buy a junky piece of equipment like an excavator, and say you get one for 20 grand and it does a great job, but all of a sudden it breaks down on you, your repair bills could be $5,000-$10,000 or more, depending on what happens. So nothing is cheap in this game, and you have to kind of plan for what's best for what your operation is. And what I'm trying to tell you is that this land is available. In my area, I have this happen all over. There's too many people that buy property to sit on it for years and years and never build on it. And then Amish come in, they clear it, the guys make the money, or the Amish buy the land from the owner, and then they put it back on the market and they sell it and they double dip and make more money. And it continually goes on like this. And the sad part is most of these people that buy this property don't have the capability or the skill level or the equipment to do the proper job. So don't be a dreamer out there trying to do this kind of stuff. If you don't have the equipment, be prepared that this is something you need to seriously consider. It is not worth, in my opinion, time. Time costs money. If your goal is to buy so many acres and you're planning to graze animals, on a nice lush pasture, or maybe plow an area, or build a pond, or have a lot of nicer ground that you can actually plow and work, this woodlot deal is not necessarily a godsend, because it's going to cost you a lot of money to do it. Now, if you have equipment that you can go in and do it yourself, maybe then it's cost effective. And like I said, if you can look at the economic positives of still converting firewood, saving the stumps and push them in a pile and let them break down into topsoil. If you can actually take the tops of the trees and mulch them up and make them into wood chips and make them another viable resource where you can either sell them or use them, as a mulch, because all you need to take these wood chips, at least in my area, they take them, they grind them up, and they dye them, and they sell them as mulch. And people do this all the time, and you could do it just as easy as anybody else and make some money, even if you sell them at a lesser price. But again, what I'm trying to tell you is you can make money on this type of stuff, but you have to be prepared. You're going to invest money to make money, and unfortunately, it doesn't work that simply. So, but be prepared though. It is a very, very costly event, and I see a lot of guys trying to do this, and I know that it'll sit for years. There's way too many properties all around me that basically are unable to do this, and it is a true commitment. So when I cleared my woods, just so you know, when I bought 32 acres, my property was mostly standing trees, and the trees weren't mature enough to be really good for a lumber yard. But because my property was lumbered in '89, I bought it in '95. So my trees were probably, a foot, maybe, a foot wide. Wasn't really going to make a lot of money on the trees that I actually had. And a lot of it were like pin oaks and maples. And so, but they still had a hell of a stump on them. Some of them had big stumps that were probably 4 or 5 foot, wide all the way around in circumference, and it was filling up the area. And then plus my property was wet that I bought because it's dead flat, and there's no drainage because it was dead flat. And I had a creek that the county had to go in through my property. It was like a bog because this, that underneath the trees there wasn't enough wind and it wasn't cleared to actually, clean it out. So, you had to get in there and clear all this woods out before you can even get the ground to actually dry. So, when I went through my property, I just bought it because, I had a vision of I'm going to clear it, I'm going to make money, and that's what I'm going to do. And I didn't realize the amount of money that I had to spend at that time. It cost me over $25,000 to $30,000 for, for what I did, and just to knock trees down and not even remove them, just to, get my property started back in 1995. I'm telling you right now, if I had to do it again now, it would probably cost me closer to $50,000. It's ridiculous, if not more. So things you need to be prepared for because it's crazy. So like I say, these are some things I think as a property buyer, if you're looking, you had the money for it, you went and saw the bank, understand there's additional costs that could be very expensive that you need to consider before doing this proposition. Now, if you want to buy the equipment or you have access to the equipment, that's great. But remember, if you buy shit equipment and it's going to break down on you and you're going to start paying a mechanic $100+ an hour or more to sit there and fix this stuff, it's tough, and it's a tough ride all the way around. And but that's the nature of the beast too. But I'm not opposed to it, but when I started, I didn't have any equipment. I had nothing. And that's the downfall, like I was talking about, being young. Once you get started, all your money goes toward, the bare essentials. When it comes down to being able to clear and purchase equipment, that's something I can do now as a 60-year-old guy or close to it. Now that I own the equipment, now I can actually start making positive headway. Because my plan on my property still is to go back and clear. And now that I have an excavator, I have the skid steers, I have the toys, I'm going to go back and start doing some of that this year. And I'll be posting a lot of that on my YouTube channel so you guys kind of see how that's all unveiling. But, again, to me, land, I don't care if you buy a 1 acre or you have 1,000 acres. In my opinion, if you're not using that land, then why have it? And I understand if you're hunting, I get that part. But, for the most part, you're paying for that land. And to me, if it ain't making me money, it's not doing me no good because I'm stuck paying taxes on it. So I would rather have viable land that I can use. I don't care if it's a pond. I don't care if it's a hayfield, whether I can put crops on it. But it has to be making me money doing something. And that's just the way I roll. So what I want to say is one of the biggest downfalls when you're talking about doing and buying property that needs to be cleared like this is that you're wasting so much time screwing around trying to clear the land and labor. It's going to take you several years, if not longer, because it's a huge commitment, and having the right equipment to go in there and actually clean up this property. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you is this is not like when you're going out and you see a housing development being developed. They take down the trees really quick, and they'll bring in huge dozers, and they'll push all the topsoil and debris and roots off the area. You don't want to disturb your ground and tear up your topsoil. What you're doing is you're actually pulling the stumps, and you're going to leave the topsoil that's there in place, and then you're going to level that whole area back out. This is not an issue of getting a dozer in there and just tearing all that topsoil up. I think that's a huge, huge mistake. I have a neighbor down the road. He has property that's up for sale right now, and he did exactly that. He wound up pushing that pile right into a wood line, and all it is you got big, huge piles of trees, roots, debris, and almost half the topsoil, if not more than half the topsoil, has been pushed off, and he did a half-ass leveling job, so he puts the house up for sale. This is the same clown that winds up going down the street and taking off all the topsoil off a field, probably about 5 acres, to sell the topsoil to make money. So then he's thinking, well, I got a sandy base of clay and sand. Oh, it'll grow, crops. Well, it doesn't grow squat, and it holds water, and he's done nothing for it. It's not even good enough to even put livestock on that field, even to graze, because the grass is crap. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that, if you own the property, you want to preserve your property. You're not building a housing development, where most of the contractors go in and they peel off all that topsoil and they take it with them so they make money on the side. That's why everybody buys a house in the suburbs, bitches, because their yard sucks, because they can't grow anything. It's because they're growing on clay, because all the topsoil has been removed by the contractor. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you own that property, preservation of your topsoil should be your number one goal. So pulling the roots out and leaving this and taking those stumps and turning them back to topsoil, if you want to reapply it, great. But understand, don't lose your soil, because that is what is the lifeblood of your property. And do not sell it, because it does you no good. And if you're going to clear it, don't push stuff in a pile that you can't manage. That's because, what he did when he pushed that stuff in a pile, somebody's going to buy this property, then they're going to have to go out with an excavator, then they're going to spend more time screwing around digging all that shit out of the wood line, and they're going to have nothing but a huge mess. They're going to have huge trees, and it's just a debacle. And I really don't want to see any of you guys buy property like that. To me, that is just purely stupid. So the best thing you can do, pull the stumps, process the stumps as is, get the tops, chop them off. And understand, this is not the most progressive thing to do. But if you buy this kind of property, you have two options. Either make it work, like I'm telling you, or B, you just let it grow, overgrow, and sit on that property for 50 years, and eventually it'll turn into a wood line. But, in the end, who wants to do that? So, if you want to live on a country and you want to buy property, this is something and a hurdle you'll have to deal with. A lot of the Amish guys don't go buy this property, but they work that ground, they remove all the debris. But you really want to have your ground clear of stumps and roots. Even if you thought about bringing in, well, I'm just going to bring in a stump grinder and grind the stump, your problem is those roots are still in the ground, and they're going to still be a hindrance to you. You got to get those roots out of there. So it's almost easier just to pull the whole darn stump out. That's the best thing I would say that you can do, and you'll be way better off for it. So just things to be aware of. This is what I wanted to talk about with this type of property. Something to be aware of is because, and you got to walk this property too, see what's actually in there, because you'll never know. And the other problem you'll have is they'll go in there with all, if they're not using horses, they're going to rut up that whole property. It's going to be nothing but a big mess. And it's going to take you a lot of time for you to level this thing out and really make it look good. But, it's doable. It's something you can do, but you got to spend the money. You got to have the right equipment to do this type of work and be prepared for it. If you don't have a dozer in today's society, you need at least a 100-horse skid steer that can actually act like a dozer, like my Kubota SLV 90. It's 90-some horse, but it's almost equivalent to a D3 dozer. So I can actually push most of the biggest stumps that I have and be able to move them around without a problem, and they can work to your advantage. So think about that, because you can do the same thing as well. A skid steer and a grapple and an excavator will be just as deadly as using a having an excavator and a dozer. Another thing that you're going to find too when they go through this area, as far as the Amish go, is you may have a large pile of slabwood that you're going to find on that property. Now that's also another income stream. A lot of people buy slabwood, and if you buy this property pretty quick after they process it, get on that and sell that slabwood as quick as possible. Get yourself, make some money, and put some money in your pocket, because it's a resource and it's something you need to do. They also have sawdust piles sitting around there. Again, horse people buy that kind of stuff. They'll get a little weird about, black walnut, but for the most part, it's probably good enough for horse people, and you could sell that too. And again, another quick resource. And I'm just throwing a couple ideas out there, but, it's going to be messy, and it's, again, time is money. And I would personally, really think twice before buying property like this, because, again, it's a big, huge undertaking, and you almost have to do it. And it's going to take you as long as the acres that you have to do. If you got a 100-acre property that's been cleared like this, or 200 acres, man, it'll take you years. Especially it's going to be you by yourself, and your equipment. you know, and you're not going to be able to run this full time, 7 days a week, 40 hours a week, you know, and if you did, it'll cost you a fortune just in fuel. So, you know, you be prepared because, you know, the weekend warrior, you want to do the least amount of work possible. So I wanted to explain this to you because people buy this property all the time. And even if you buy it as a hunting property, it's a terrible property. It seems nice at first, but the downfall is when this stuff starts growing up, it's going to be so thick you can't even walk through it. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to clear my property 20 years ago, was it was so thick. And it actually is not as thick now, but it's still bad enough that we can't ride horses through it. So I get back there and I'm clearing mine off, doing the same thing, trying to get rid of all that small underbrush, and it'll make a hell of a difference just drying out your property too. So it takes a long time for that stuff to break down, but it'll work out for you if you, as long as you're persistent enough. But you know, to me, it's a commitment in itself, and I think that you may be better off, if you think about it, to buy a different type of property where you don't have to do so much work, because it's all you're going to do is be in a land clearing operation. You're not going to be starting the farm that you really wanted to do. And there's a big difference between clearing a couple acres on your own terms than it is to go out there and try to clear hundreds of acres. You know, unless you have the manpower and the equipment, it's not cost effective. You know, but you know, again, you have to have the equipment, and that's, most people don't have it, especially when you're starting out. And this is the trick and the trap that I think a lot of people that are young that do start out, they buy this kind of property because it's affordable, but it's not affordable when you have to do that kind of work to it. You know, now if you were smart about it and you did it slowly, it would be okay. But again, you have to establish that. So with that said, I don't want to keep talking about this kind of stuff. I think that I got my point across. I think you guys understand where I'm coming from. You guys, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful. You know, and I'm not knocking buying that type of property. I'm just telling you that if you want to get ahead, this is not the property for you. If you get it for a real cheap price, maybe it's a property you may want to play with, you know, especially if you have a different property, a different location, or if this property is adjoining to, say, a pre-existing farm, maybe it might be worth buying because you can do it at your own terms. But if you're just starting out, you just need to get land to get started, this may not be for you, and only you can tell the difference. So that's why I'm leaving it as is, and I just wanted to touch base on it because, you know, when I was younger, I would probably buy that kind of property thinking, oh, I'll just clear it. You know, and in reality is until you've done this type of work, which I have, I'm telling you, it's not that simple. So, you know, it sounds simple, but it's not that simple, and it takes a lot of time to do and a lot of work and a lot of effort. So, you know, just be prepared for that. And, you know, the next series on chapter number 9 that we're going to cover, part 9, episode 9, whatever, is we're going to talk about buying land that's, whether it's open field or uncleared wood, just, you know, or maybe a combination thereof, a property that has no buildings on it whatsoever. We'll talk about that next. And then we'll go from there. And that one shouldn't be as long or drawn out as this one because of all the things that have taken place. But again, it still has the same issues. And, you know, it all depends on how you want to look at it. But it's important to kind of look at all this property and really think to yourself, you know, how long is it going to take me to get this cleared off? You know, how am I going to set this up? Do I have the capital to do all this? You know, do I have the equipment to do all this? Because it all adds up real quick. And the more you can figure out, the better off you'll be. You know, living a country life sounds cool, but it comes with a lot of headaches. And I'm just trying to explain to you some of the headaches when you do to get started. Talk to you guys later.